The sun hung low over Ouagadougou, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of the city's streets. Dust swirled in the dry Harmattan wind, settling on the faded walls of Ouagadougou Hospital, a once proud institution now crumbling under the weight of neglect. Inside, the air buzzed with the muffled cries of women in labor, the clatter of rusty IV stands, and the murmured prayers of families crowded into dimly lit corridors. Nurses moved like ghosts between patients, their faces etched with exhaustion. The revolution had come to Burkina Faso, but here, in this forgotten corner of the capital, it felt as though time had stopped, until the soldiers arrived. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's voice crackled through the radio in Lieutenant Amadou's jeep that morning. "Go to Ouagadougou," he'd said, his tone firm but calm. "Not to fight, but to serve. Show them what this revolution means." Amadou had frowned, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Soldiers weren't midwives. They carried rifles, not bandages. But Traoré's orders were absolute. The captain had dissolved the old regime's corruption, not with bullets alone, but with a radical idea. A soldier's duty is to the soil that feeds him, to the people who breathe life into the nation. Amadou didn't fully understand it yet, but he obeyed. When the jeeps rolled into the hospital compound, panic erupted. Mothers clutched their children closer. A janitor dropped a mop and fled. The sight of uniforms, olive green, boots caked in red earth, still stirred fear in a country scarred by coups. But then Amadou stepped out, slinging his rifle over his shoulder, and raised both hands, empty. "We're here to help," he called, his voice cutting through the silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then a nurse, her scrubs stained with blood, pointed to the maternity wing. "The elevators haven't worked in months," she said flatly. "Women in labor are carried upstairs on stretchers. Sometimes they don't make it in time." Amadou's jaw tightened. He turned to his men. "Leave the guns in the vehicles," he ordered. "Today, we carry something heavier." The soldiers became beasts of burden. They hauled buckets of clean water from the well outside. They lifted women in wheelchairs, donated years ago by a foreign NGO, but left to rust when the ramps collapsed. Up 3 flights of stairs, their muscles straining as they navigated narrow stairwells. Private Sekou, barely 19, tripped on a broken tile and scraped his knee raw, but he refused to let go of the wheelchair handles. "Désolé, désolé," he kept whispering to the woman gripping the armrests, her face pale with pain. She laughed weakly. "You're the first man who's apologized to me all week." By midday, the hospital hummed with a new rhythm. Soldiers mopped floors, their rifles swapped for mops. Amadou found himself in a supply closet, counting rolls of gauze while a midwife barked orders. "We need more gloves, and where's the antiseptic?" He blinked, overwhelmed, but scribbled notes like a schoolboy. In the courtyard, Corporal Diallo, a hulking man who'd once wrestled rebels in the Sahel, cradled a newborn while its mother slept, his calloused hands trembling as the infant yawned. But it was in Ward C that the day's miracle unfolded. Aissata Coulibaly had been at Ouagadougou for 2 days, her contractions coming in waves. At 28, she'd already buried 2 children, one to malaria, one to hunger. And when the pains began, she'd walked 6 kilometers under the searing sun, clutching her swollen belly. The doctors had frowned at her ultrasound. "Triplets," one muttered. "In this place?" They'd put her in a wheelchair, its wheels squeaking like dying birds, and left her in a corner. When Private Sekou found her, she was humming an old Songhai lullaby, her forehead glistening with sweat. "You're going upstairs," he said, kneeling beside her. She eyed his uniform. "Why?" He hesitated. Because Captain Traoré says every mother deserves a bed." The climb to the 3rd floor took 10 minutes. Sekou's arms burned, but Aissata's grip on his sleeve never wavered. "You have children?" she asked, breathing through a contraction. No, he admitted, but my sister died in a place like this. They couldn't stop the bleeding. Aissata nodded. This time will be different, she said, though neither knew if she meant the birth or the country. The delivery room had one working light. Aissata lay on a stained mattress, her hands bound to the bed frame with torn sheets, a makeshift solution when the straps broke. The doctor, a gaunt man with glasses mended with tape, shook his head. We have no incubators, no blood reserves. If something goes wrong... Amadou, hovering in the doorway, interrupted. What do you need? What followed was a blur. Soldiers became couriers, racing through traffic on motorcycles to fetch oxygen tanks from a clinic across town. A medic fashioned a neonatal warmer from foil blankets and a desk lamp. And when the first baby emerged, a girl, tiny as a kitten, Diallo sprinted downstairs to the Jeep, ripped out the car battery, and rigged it to a heating pad. Engineering training, he grunted when the nurses stared. Aissata's second child, another girl, came feet first. The doctor cursed. Breach. I need... Before he finished, Amadou was at Aissata's side, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. Look at me, he ordered, his soldier's voice softening. You're the strongest woman in Burkina. You've walked through fire. Now push. When the third baby, a boy, finally slipped free, the room exhaled. The infants were placed on Aissata's chest, their cries thin but alive. The doctor sank onto a stool, wiping his brow. I've never seen triplets here. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. Amadou leaned against the wall, his uniform splattered with blood and amniotic fluid. Sekou appeared, holding a cup of tea. The mother wants to name the boy, he said. Aissata's voice was hoarse but steady. His name is Ibrahim, she said, tracing the boy's wrinkled cheek. After the captain. News spread faster than the Harmattan wind. By dawn, Ouagadougou's gates were crowded with villagers, journalists, and curious soldiers. Traoré himself arrived at noon, his usual entourage replaced by a single aide. He paused at Aissata's bedside, staring at the three infants swaddled in army-issue blankets. You honor me, he said quietly. Aissata met his gaze. No, Captain, you honored us. The photograph that circled the globe that week was unremarkable. A young mother, her smile weary but triumphant, flanked by soldiers holding her newborns. But in Burkina Faso, it became a talisman. Farmers pinned it to mud brick walls. School children drew crayon versions. Traoré's critics scoffed. A publicity stunt. But in the markets, women began to say his name differently. Ibrahim, not just a soldier, a man who made soldiers carry wheelchairs. Years later, when little Ibrahim Koulibaly started school, his sisters bragged about the day they were born. The army saved us, they'd say, though the story grew grander with each telling. Tanks transformed into ambulances, gunfire into fireworks. Their mother would gently correct them. It wasn't the army, she'd say. It was people. Soldiers who remembered they were people first. And in a way, she was right. The revolution didn't end corruption. It didn't magically fix Ouagadougou's elevators. But on that dusty afternoon, when a woman's song mingled with the grunts of men lifting her toward the light, something shifted. A captain's order became a nation's parable. True power isn't seized. It's given by the hands that catch life as it falls.